So anyway, the monitor and morphister, if there's one thing they're worried about, it's that a consciousness in the network. See, while it's in there, it grows and it feeds. The whole reality complex is made of consciousness, and these consciousnesses grow and they get certain powers. And the fear is that they'll realize that they're trapped in the complex before they have all basically the social skills to use these powers wisely rather. Okay. So the drama is that the monitor has had a realization trigger, fire, in somebody that is, when scanned, shows no history, no nearness, a very average person, average consciousness, just a few reincarnations in, shows no signs of enlightenment, and yet this trigger has gone off. And this is what they're worried about. Because if somebody that is halfway formed like this realizes that the reality complex is a sort of a trick, it's somewhat easy for them to escape it. All right, their only protection is to sort of unrealize this person's realization. Now, the way it works is the monitor and the morphester can't go into the reality complex in a sort of a day waking thing because they would disturb it. So they have to use the access period, which is when people go to sleep. When people go to sleep, the monitor and the morphester, they actually enter into the pure conceptual space, the real space, and the monitor and morphester can get in there as well. Now, in a sophisticated consciousness, they would have defenses against this sort of thing. But we're starting off in the reality complex with raw consciousness. And part of it is that it installs these access, these back doors and stuff, so that while you're sleeping, the monitor and morphester can access your dreams, find out things, look at your memories and histories, because they're not even really invading your privacy if you think about it, because everything that happens to you in a reality complex is part of a VR of their creation, of course. They have access to that information. And so the morphister creates an environment to interview this person, Dave, we'll call him, or David, um, to see what if they seem enlightened or if they have some sort of sinister backdoor access to enlightenment or what. And while the morphister is doing this, the monitor is watching things, and the monitor comes to the conclusion that something's terribly wrong. Because while the morphister is talking to David, David manifests a small baton in his hand, basically the size of a pen, and he starts spinning it. And this behavior change, this idiosyncratic behavior change is, the morphister notices it, but the monitor with his scanning devices is able to say that it's a different personality, still looking like David, sitting there in the set that they've created out of David's memories, his grandfather's den by the fireplace, and they're sitting there talking, and they realize, oh, this is not David. Who is this? And it turns out to be a character that claims they're not in need of a name, and so there is no name for that character. And there's some labels. But it turns out this character is a consciousness that was inside of the network of conscious energy that makes up David's mind. So much like David and other mortals are caught in the reality complex, this creature was caught in the David complex, David's consciousness complex. The thing is, this character realizes that they're caught in there, and doesn't think of it as being caught. They just know they're in people's minds. They have access to their dreams and stuff, and he has a way to move from mind to mind. He believes that reality is real. He doesn't know about the reality complex, but since he knows he's in a complex, it triggered some of the realization um, tests, and so they're very concerned because the monitor especially is still quite concerned that this might mean that he could escape the reality complex even without knowing that that's what it was, that he could realize he was trapped in a complex, transcend it, and not just leave David's mind but leave the complex as well. And the monitor and Morfester don't know he has a way to transfer himself. And right when they're trying to do something to cage this character and study and find out because they think it's a dangerous thing, the reality complex, it disappears. And it turns out that with its, I don't really explain this in the story, but I'll tell you that with the playing with the little baton, uh, the character is able to hypnotize people that are watching and it's just somewhat distracted, trying not to pay attention, and use that as a data channel to transfer himself into your consciousness complex. And yeah, they don't know what he did, but it turns out he escapes through the monitor. Okay, now I think this is a pretty complete system for this kind of thing. It would basically work. The reality complex does not have to even be constructed. It could have evolved over millions or trillions or timelessness. After just from this consciousness is flowing around, there'd be some networks that got caught in like life, somehow comes to be from that kind of process. This reality complex could have come to be, or it could have been created by the monitor Morfester, or the monitor Morfester are part of it. I don't know, but the idea that we're free beings and why would we be on this world? It seems like, oh, we're being taught lessons and there's things for us to learn here, and therefore this borrows that kind of idea and kind of explains why we would need that. That it would all be about interacting, and there's some of that. It's all about relationships kind of thing in there. So it has a lot of the warm fuzzies of both the Western New Age, occult inspired stuff and the Hindu, Buddhist kind of ideas about what it means to transcend physical reality. Now, when I thought about this story, uh, like I said, as a deconstructive reader, I ended up coming to the conclusion I did not believe that the monitor and the Morfester were correct. The reality complex was not what they thought. Instead, the reality complex was a mind virus, sort of like in Need of No Name, that had infected actual brains, material brains. In other words, so there's a material reality. And not that it's not some sort of a dream on a higher level, but basically that the space that the monitor Morfester thought was the whole universe was really the space of a group mind. And the monitor and Morfester, I realized, were creatures just like in Need of No Name. They infected individuals. They were inside David. Okay, they weren't in. They might have been inside everyone, but the ones in the story were the ones inside David, and it was just their conceit to think that they had this big deal. And the access period is actually is not because of sleeping, dreaming takes you to another world, but it's because the monitor and the Morfester have to communicate through a data channel. Now, their data channels are unconscious. In Need of No Name consciously knows how to create a data channel and use it. Am I almost out? Yeah, so I'll be cut off in a second. But how to create the data channel and use it, though he doesn't really know he's left a copy in other brains. Whereas the monitor and Morfester, they don't think of it as copies. There's copies of themselves in other brains, and they communicate in these unconscious ways with these other brains, and they pretend that they are in control of the whole universe. And it somewhat becomes a metaphor for how theism works, because this is how we all have an idea of God. There's a God, a monitor God, or a Morfester God in each one of us, which is just an idea come into our brain. And it has other allegiances, and if we don't do what it wants, and the copies of it that are its partners and siblings and other minds, it will be against us.